Do you think you're the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo? Or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest?
Just what are you trying to say?
If I were able to become you for a moment, this foolish idea would become a lot more grounded and real, don't you think?
I just don't want to see anyone getting hurt again. I tried to lock myself away and disappear. But Gojo warned me I'd be too lonely, and I couldn't argue with him. I don't want to be all alone! I want to be needed by someone! I want it to be alright! To know that I'm alive!
Yuta Kotsu, huh? I just don't see as much appeal in that boy as you do. I'm sorry to say this, but Yuta Kotsu could never replace you.
What does it mean to be the strongest? What is strength in relation to one's humanity? Jujutsu Kaisen is a story that centers itself around the topic of strength, with the most recent chapter focusing on Gojo and Yuta's thoughts on this subject. I believe that chapter 261 is a story about how two individuals suffer as a result of the system they live in, with Gojo being the predecessor for Yuta's decision. Now before I get into things, I just want to say that writing these types of videos is always a challenge because I know that a lot of people view the analytical side of the Jujutsu Kaisen fandom to be pretentious, claiming that their understanding of the story is superior to others, and if you don't agree, it means that you don't understand the story, that you're not reading. That is not the purpose of this video. All I want to do is create a discussion. Now, Gojo is a controversial character, whether it be in the story or outside of it. Ever since his death, the fandom has been divided on their thoughts towards the character. Some believe that Gojo's death was justice to the character, while some believe he needed to return to conclude his arc. Now, if you think that all of these differing opinions on Gojo means that the character is badly written or written well, I say it's up for debate. I don't believe that everyone having the same opinion on a character means that the writing is good and vice versa. Just because a character has so many different outlooks on them doesn't always mean that there is some masterfully written character. Although a lot of this discourse wouldn't exist if Gege just enhanced the story more by expanding on more things, but that's a whole other topic. I'll probably focus on it in another video. Gojo's entire character revolves around how his infinity symbolizes his solitude, an infinite space around him that doesn't allow him to connect with others via his own power. But what is so beautiful about this tragedy is that Gojo's solitude is equally his own fault as it is the environment around him. A major talking point in the fandom right now is Gojo's comment in response to the plan of Yuta taking over his body if he were to die, that he ultimately doesn't care about what happens to his body after death, but he is annoyed that Shoko didn't object to this decision. This has resulted in a lot of fans saying that Shoko doesn't care about Gojo. Personally, I don't see it that way. In chapter 233, we literally see Shoko having gone through a ridiculous amount of cigarettes while watching Gojo fight against Sukuna, and Shoko caring about Gojo is further proven with chapter 222 when we see her inside thoughts about her feelings and frustration towards Gojo's actions, believing that he wasn't alone, that she was there for him. However, both of these characters are never truly vulnerable with each other, resulting in a misunderstanding. This resistance of vulnerability is delved into more when Yuta tries to connect with Gojo, attempting to shoulder his burden, pleading that he doesn't need to become a monster alone. And what does Gojo do? He immediately rejects Yuta. Gojo desires people to understand him, but when he's offered a positive environment that would allow him to be vulnerable, he goes back to what's comfortable for him, because he's convinced himself that after the events of Hidden Inventory with Geto, nobody else will ever be an equal to him, so why would anyone understand him? I feel that a lot of the fandom glorifies Gojo's behavior as some victim who was done wrong by the people around him, when that is simply not the case. Like with the example I brought up earlier, part of this development is Gojo's own fault. A relationship is a two-way street. If you feel isolated and misunderstood, you should voice these concerns to the people you care about. Self-sabotage is the tragedy of Satoru Gojo, someone given everything but failing to protect anything, never able to overcome this contradiction and only finding some solitude through death. What makes it so heartbreaking is that even now after his death, Gojo has been completely reduced to the label of strongest, a lifeless tool in a system, all because Yuta has headed down the same path as Gojo. Yuta starts a story battling his own contradiction of isolating himself in order to not hurt anyone, even though he wishes to be with others, have people rely on him, and believe that it's okay to keep living, ultimately finding a home in Jujutsu High and realizing it's okay for him to live. When the main plotline of Jujutsu Kaisen begins, a shift in Yuta's character begins. The Culling Games is when the topic of Yuta bearing Gojo's burden is presented, with Yuta vowing to kill Kenjaku so that Gojo doesn't have to kill his best friend again. There's also another important thing to notice about this moment, that Yuta is trying to affirm himself as the Gojo for Jujutsu High since everyone is physically and mentally exhausted after the Shibuya incident. This is further touched on with Uro's prophecy prophecy that Yuta will reach a limit unless he throws away his humanity. Fast forward to the Shinjuku Showdown arc, and we have a Yuta that is now going through moments similar to Gojo, acknowledging his great morality with his obsession for killing Kenjaku, resulting in Higuruma's death. Yuta goes through a negative character arc. His selfless nature and genuine love for others, which was once seen as a strength, is not a catalyst for his loss of humanity, as a result of being one of the few people in the series to understand Gojo the most. The brutal irony of Kenjaku claiming that Yuta can't become the next Satoru Gojo is that Yuta ends up becoming Gojo physically and mentally. This is showcased through how Yuta handles the discussion about the plan in chapter 261, disregarding everyone's support in favor of isolating himself in order to take on the role of a monster. Sounds familiar, right? Yuta is doing the same thing Gojo does when he rejects his students' support before killing the higher ups. It's an insane parallel because Gojo feeling like he needs to catch up to Geto is how Yuta feels towards Gojo in this situation, being that Yuta taking over Gojo's body is not a triumphant moment. It's not a win, it's a loss. As I talked about earlier in this video, Gojo is the result of the flawed Jujutsu society that values the belief that an overwhelming sense of self and a complete disregard for others is correct, which is in line with Sukuna's belief that one should live a hedonistic life and disregard their humanity. Sukuna is overjoyed with Yuta's evolution, showing him respect by saying his full name, meaning that Sukuna's ideology has won against Yuta. Yuta was meant to surpass Gojo, not just in strength but in ideology, but through the role of the strongest, he has ended up falling down the same self-destructive path. Gojo wanted strong allies so that nobody would have to take the position of strongest, becoming a lonely tool used in Jujutsu society. This is why I believe that Yuji will be the one to end Sukuna, the key to achieving Gojo's dream and breaking the cycle of loneliness. Because Yuji defeating Sukuna, who's the antithesis of this ideology, would ultimately end this cycle of belief altogether. That is what will allow for Gojo's vision on what the future Jujutsu should be, the triumph over Sukuna's ideals, not a victory won by failing to surpass the mentality of the previous generation. Many characters throughout Jujutsu Kaisen lose aspects of their humanity, with characters seemingly being rewarded for this change, although while characters are momentarily rewarded in these moments, I don't believe that the story completely pushes this narrative. And I think moments like Maki telling Kamo not to go down the same path as her is evidence that the story is being consistent with heading towards this conclusion. There's some really interesting routes that the story can take from here. Throughout this arc, Maki has consistently been the one trying to keep Yuta in check, so it would be really cool to see her return and aid Yuta so that he doesn't have to shoulder everything alone. But again, these are just my thoughts on a weekly manga before its completion, so in a couple of months this video could age horribly, and then there will be a discussion on if this series ever was consistent with its themes and messages. Hell, you could argue that I only enjoy this current development because I'm tunnel visioned on a certain path that the story should go. Like if the development of Yuji going down the same path of hedonism as Sukuna happens, then I will probably start to question what the entire point of this story was. I will be there with the pitchforks like everyone else. But again, I'm not some genius that knows everything, I'm just a dude that makes YouTube videos, so that's for future me to worry about. Anyways, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are in regards to the character arcs of Gojo and Yuta. Do you agree or disagree with everything I've talked about? I'm really interested to hear people's opinions on this chapter, because it is one of the most controversial Jujutsu Kaisen chapters to date, although most things related to Gojo have always been controversial. One thing I think everyone can agree with is that Gojo has insane drip, and if you want to replicate Gojo's style of fashion, check out Anime Express, the sponsor of today's video. Let's keep it real. A lot of anime merch sucks, low quality, and the designs are not moving the soul, but the Anime Express store has something for you. Hoodies, t-shirts, shorts, LED lamps, jewelry, black blades in stock filled with Mihawk's Conqueror's hockey. This store will feed you well, especially if you are a JJK fan. And don't worry, I'm looking out for my day ones, so if you use the code TheLocalDub10, you get a 10% discount at checkout. So make sure to lock in at animeexpress.store so you don't end up like Gojo. If you stuck around till the end of the video, I just want you to know that I appreciate you. And if you want to talk to me about anime related topics, join my Discord server. Also consider becoming a channel member, another way to support me, and I support you back with shoutouts at the end of the video, early access to new videos, custom emotes, and members only videos depending on which level of membership you decide to choose. And if you're someone that enjoys anime content that keeps it real, consider subscribing so when I hit 10K, you can brag about being a day one. I gotta get back in the kitchen to cook. Peace.